There is one candidate who has been largely ignored by the mainstream media. Shame on us. He deserves more attention from us than he's getting. Ron Paul makes a lot of sense, and more people ought to listen to him. The Texas congressman has visionary ideas about where the country ought to be going and what sea changes are necessary in order for the U.S. to continue being a superpower. When Ron Paul ran for the Republican nomination in 2008, he talked about the economy imploding, the untenable nature of the national debt, the eventual destruction of our currency, and a limited role for government. He showed tremendous fundraising ability and had an absolutely rabid base of support. In the 4 years since then, a lot of the things Ron Paul warned us about have happened. We're deeper in debt, a lot deeper. The dollar is worth quite a bit less. The federal government increasingly dysfunctional, and the country is more divided maybe than at any time since the Civil War. Well, it seems events over the last 4 years have finally caught up with the candidate. Paul's message hasn't changed, but the urgency of what he's saying has increased dramatically. And it seems like this time more people may be listening. He came within an eyelash of finishing first in the Iowa straw poll, less than 200 votes behind Michelle Bachmann out of nearly 17,000 votes cast. Again, a fact that was largely overlooked by the mainstream media.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Really fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
There's a top tier now of Bachmann and Perry and Romney, and, you know, we haven't mentioned, and we should.
Thank you.
We haven't mentioned, and we should, Rick Santorum, who did really surprisingly well for the amount of money and resources he had.
Rick Santorum? He didn't get half of what Ron Paul got. He lost to the guy who lost so bad he dropped out of the race. Santorum?
We're looking at Mitt Romney, who continues to be the front runner, but we have Rick Perry as well, and now Michelle Bachmann. Let's not count out John Huntsman, though.
What? John Huntsman? Huntsman got 69 votes. If all of John Huntsman's supporters met at the same Ames, Iowa Quiznos, the fire marshal would say, yeah, that's fine, no problem.
A new Gallup survey showing Rick Perry running second to Mitt Romney, knocking down Iowa favorite Michelle Bachmann to fourth.
Behind who? Fourth behind who? How did libertarian Ron Paul become the 13th floor in a hotel? Why? What's wrong with... He is Tea Party patient zero. All that small government grassroots business, he planted that grass. He's the one guy in the field, agree with him or don't agree with him, who doesn't go out of his way to regurgitate talking points or change what he believes to fit the audience he's in front of.
Tonight on the docket, why the Republican Party will never be the same again. If ever a presidential hopeful embodied the notion of personal freedom and fidelity to the Constitution, it would be Texas Republican Congressman Ron Paul. He's a genuine fiscal hawk who refused to vote to raise the debt ceiling because he knows that government borrowing causes inflation. He voted against the Patriot Act because he understands that it is a massive assault on Americans' freedoms because it lets federal agents write their own search warrants. And he's the dark horse who was the runner-up in this weekend's Ames, Iowa straw poll, leaving winner Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann with a mere 1% margin over him.
Ron Paul came away with a decisive win in California's first ever straw poll over the weekend. He received 45% of the vote.
There's one other candidate who you might have noticed. Well, I don't know if you're watching the mainstream media. You might not have noticed that he was omitted from that list. Let's see. How much did Ron Paul get in this last quarter from active duty military? Oh, my gosh. $36,739.79. No surprise, actually, that this was the case, far outstripping all other Republican presidential candidates put together, as was the case 4 years ago. But let's see. Let's compare this to who's the other guy running for president in 2012? Oh, yeah. $28,833.99 for the president himself.
Ron Paul is the big winner in today's Values Voters Summit straw poll in Washington.
Ron Paul, the libertarian, the live and let live libertarian, comes out on top among a group of very, very socially conservative Republicans.
Texas Congressman Ron Paul emerging as the winner of this year's Values Voters Summit straw poll. Results that could potentially set the stage for the upcoming primary elections, now just 3 months away. A key group of Republican voters making their top picks tonight.
But now you say when you walk onto the floor, you're a popular guy. Republicans surround you and they want to know about one thing. How are you raising all that money?
They're asking the wrong question. I mean, it isn't a technique, it's a message.
You set the record. In the history of American politics, nobody has ever raised more money on a single day than you.
Gosh.
And yet, this is happening without your campaign people coordinating it. This is completely about grassroots, and it's completely about you just saying what you believe in.
Another question about electability. Do you have any, sir? There's always the question as to whether or not you are in fact viable. Your differences with the Republicans with the rest of the Republicans on this stage has raised questions about whether or not you can actually win the Republican nomination, sir.
Well, we've only had 2 little primaries so far, so it's pretty premature to decide which one is going to be the candidate. But, you know, when you think about it, if you measured everything I've ever said, every vote I've ever taken against the Constitution, you know, I'm a strict constitutionalist. Are you suggesting the Republicans should write me off because I'm a strict constitutionalist? I'm the most conservative member here. I have voted, you know, against more spending and waste in government than anybody else. So you're suggesting that I'm not electable and the Republicans don't want me because I'm a strict fiscal conservative? Because I believe in civil liberties? Why should we not be defending civil liberties? And why should we not be talking about foreign policy that used to be the part of the Republican Party? Mr. Republican Robert Taft didn't even want us to be in NATO. And you're saying now that we have to continue to borrow money from China to finance this empire that we can't afford? Let me see if I get this right. We need to borrow $10 billion from China, and then we give it to Musharraf, who's a military dictator who overthrew an elected government, and then we go to war, we lose all these lives promoting democracy in Iraq. I mean, what's going on here?